So if it's okay, I'm going to speak in English, mais je peux prendre des questions en anglais ou en français. Mais tout le travail que je suis en train de faire, je le fais en anglais, donc les mots me viennent plus facilement en anglais. So I introduce myself. My name is Davender Gupta, and for the past 17 years, I've been working with technology startups to help them in getting clear about what their idea is all about, and then creating the momentum so that they enter the market and they start to grow their business. And this project called the Scale-Up Project is the next iteration of what I'm building. And so you'll hear more about it starting in January and as we move on. And it's going to be what I call an amplifier. So not just accelerating a business, but helping it grow bigger and better and more profitable. Because as you'll hear, that's what's really important to me. So I'm going to talk tonight about a project, a research project I'm doing as part of my Executive MBA at McGill called a strategy framework for modeling, managing, and monetizing the scaling of bootstrapped high-performance ventures. And of course, when you have titles that are academic, each word has a meaning. That's why it's there. So I sum it up by scaling smart. And that's the movement that I hope that we'll start tonight with this presentation. So who am I? There's my CV over there. But I'll tell you my story and why I'm passionate about this. So I started my career way back in 1979. How many of you were even existing here in 1979? Okay, so a few people, so I'm not the only oldsy. But I started computer programming, and then I entered the Canadian Air Force, and for 15 years I was doing technology development. So I have a background in hardware and software integration with a specialty in digital imaging. And when I left the military in 1995, I launched my own startup in digital imaging based in Calgary. And I came across some colleagues, and we wanted to get together to build a digital health management platform. You maybe heard of that. It still doesn't exist 20 years later. Well, we thought we had the solution. And so with my imaging background, and there was some database background and web programming that was just really starting up at that time, we launched a startup. And we were about 7-8 people at the beginning. And the interesting thing is that our clients were really motivated. How many of you remember Y2K? Y2K, it was the perfect sales motivation because there's a hard date, January 1st, 2000, all computers will stop unless you give us money. And that was our sales pitch. And so even as we were still trying to architect the whole thing, we made sales to 2 provinces and to 2 major insurance companies. So we had market validation even before we had a product. And then we turned around and we took that money and we raised about 10 million in private financing at the time, private investment. So imagine today, 20 years later, that's quite a chunk of change. So we used that money to scale fast. We had money and we had to burn it. And that was the whole idea at the time. You have money and you have to burn it as fast as possible. You don't talk about, now you talk a bit more about burn rate, about being careful. No, you get money and you spend it as fast as possible. And because of Y2K, it was really hard to hire engineers. So we bought whole companies. We bought a company in Halifax and we bought a company in Toronto. And we were based out in Calgary. And my role was the development manager. So we went from 8 to 60 in a matter of weeks. And my job was to try and make this, I was the director of development. I had to make this thing work. Now individually, people were brilliant. But when we put it together, it didn't work. Now you have clients, the weeks are going, the months are going, we're getting closer to that fateful day where all the clocks tick over, and clients are getting really, really nervous. To the point where my role became more being the buffer between the clients who were screaming at me and the developers who were screaming at me because they couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. And so the whole thing just collapsed, just shy of Y2K. The companies and the provinces still have health systems, so they survived. I don't know how, and I don't care. But I lost a lot of money. I lost basically a house worth of money. And it really got me thinking, why did it fall like that. We had brilliant people. We had market validation. We had everything that you say you need to grow. And even back then, that's when I realized it wasn't about the technology. It's about execution maturity, the ability to execute. And our customer demands grew faster than our ability to execute. Tech scales really fast, people don't. So if there's something that you remember for tonight, people don't scale well. And that's the challenge. And that's why scaling smart becomes so much more important, because what we're saying today is go start your idea and do hockey stick growth and you'll become a billionaire. That's what we're teaching in accelerators. That's what we're teaching in schools. And this is getting me more and more frustrated. And I hope you see it in my face, because finally, after 17 years of coaching, I'm developing the courage to be able to say it out loud. There has to be another way than just hockey stick. Because, of course, if you look at any kind of graph, success metric, take it valuations or revenues or traffic over time, this is what we promise, the hockey stick. And you're over here, you're a poor young guy, and over here, you'll be a rich young guy. And young and guy, it's there for a purpose too. It's usually guys that get the money. But even VCs will tell you, the VC model is not working because companies aren't growing like that. And in Canada, it's even worse because there's not enough cash available in the ecosystem. And it takes too long. It takes, on average, 4 years for a company to get their first pre-Series A kind of funding of maybe about $2 million on average. And those are real numbers. Only about 45 companies a year in Canada get any kind of VC funding. And we're lucky here in Montreal because it's all happening here. You go to Quebec City, there's no VC funding in Quebec City. You go to Ottawa, there's very little VC funding there. So what happens is, you start burning other people's money and then the whole thing just goes blah. And you die. And if you track most of the companies going out of founder fuel and all of those, that's where they're at. Valley of death. That's not where we want to be. That's not building a business. That's a waste of time. And what's the whole purpose of lean? Is to avoid waste. That is huge waste. So, being distracted by traction, insufficient evidence of problem solution and product market fit. Of course, you try and get the money first, and you just get enough evidence to justify getting the money, but you don't have enough evidence to really build your business decisions out of that. No path to profitability. If you're losing money now, you're going to lose money tomorrow. And what's the recent Virage sale? Recently, they had to sell. They had gotten all this money, but they couldn't find a path to profitability. So they sold to a larger company for an undisclosed amount. Now, whenever you hear sold for an undisclosed amount, that means nobody made money. And finally, ability to execute lags demand. So you have people signing on, they get frustrated and they leave. So all the work that you've done to try and get your customer traction just disappears. So that's the problem when you try and think that hockey stick is the only way to go. What is strategy? Strategy is a pattern of choices. Hockey stick is just one type of pattern of choices. And you have to take into account many things. So these are just some of the sub-choices you have to make when you decide to enter the market and start to build a company. What's your exit strategy? Are you building to sell or building to grow? Where are you in the value chain? And where you are in the value chain will shift depending on where you are in the maturity of your company. What's your innovation strategy? Are you a product innovation or a value innovation? Are you sustaining innovation or disruptive innovation? These are just some of the choices you need to make. It's not just about, get lots of money, get lots of customers, and things are great. That's not how it works in real life. Steve Blank defines startup as an organization formed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. So Uber is not a startup. I don't just ignore the popular definition. We're going to use the real definition. You're searching. And then eventually you become a business which is able to execute. But in the middle, you're a scale-up. And what I want to do is I want to make the word scale-up popular. Who cares about startups? Startups are nothing. Startups are not creating any value. Startups are babies. We want people who can at least crawl and walk. So scale-ups have the objective to develop the ability to execute and the credibility to attract. Those are the two things you're focusing on in scaling up the smart way. Not customer attraction, that's a false metric. What you're developing is the ability to execute, and the metric for that is profitability, and the credibility to attract, the credibility so that you can go and, so some people call it the branding, but it's more than that. It's the credibility and knowing where you fit in the whole value chain. So scaling smart, the way I define it, is maximizing execution while managing uncertainty. Managing uncertainty because you cannot predict the future. Who knows what life is going to be like? And we're entering a very uncertain time. Who knows next year if we're going to be able to sell as easily into the States as we do now? And you have all of these entrepreneurs who say, oh, we're going to make money when we go into the States. It's going to get harder and harder to sell south of the border, no matter what happens. That's just one of the uncertainties that are happening. So your strategic objectives then become what? Suitability. So remember, strategy is how you make choices. So your strategic objectives, suitability, how your choices align with your mission, your vision, and your values. Acceptability, how they fit your success and risk criteria. How many of you have an idea of how much money you're willing to lose in building your business? And what are the numbers? Just shout some numbers out. How much are you willing to lose? Nothing? 10,000, 15,000?
A year's salary.
A year's salary? Yeah. You need to know how much you're willing to lose. Because how else are you going to know if there's an acceptable loss here? Feasibility. How can you execute your strategy? How can you make choices with what you have at hand? Not hoping somebody will give you $500,000 to cover your losses. It's what you have in the hand that counts. And you have to build your choices based on that. And then finally, effectual. What effectual choices are all about is how you co-create your future with your stakeholders. It's not you saying, I'm going to change the world. It's say, let's get together and find a way to make the world a better place. That is the insight that makes the whole system come together for smart scaling. Just to quickly explain the distinction, most entrepreneurs think in a causal way. I have a goal. In 2 years, I want to be a millionaire. So what am I going to do now to become a millionaire? So everybody's focused on the goal, and then you select the means. Now, there's been some very interesting research done by Dr. Saras Sarathvathy. I forget which university in the States, but she calls it effectuation. And she studied successful entrepreneurs and not so successful entrepreneurs to really understand what makes us tick. And she realized real entrepreneurs, not those that are just throwing money and hoping to reach the jackpot, but real entrepreneurs who want to build value, they assume the future is unknowable and unknown, which changes everything. That means the goal is to figure out possibilities. And this is at the heart of the lean approach. What is lean? The build, measure, learn loop, right? And why you're doing that, not just to validate or invalidate hypotheses, but it's to figure out what can I learn that is not only to validate what I already thought, but what can I discover? So these become the 5 elements of effectuation. And the most important is down here. I cannot control the future. I cannot predict the future, but I can control how I respond to it. And that's the heart. That's the mindset behind lean. So if you do this, what starts to emerge? Well, you don't want investors right away, because investors lock you into one strategic path. You want to co-create. You want to find customers who will invest early on in tests, in case studies with you. And you want to build rapid build, measure, learn loops right from the start. You want to explore what the possibilities are. You know your thingy is good enough for, you want to apply it. An example, I was talking this afternoon, an entrepreneur who's building a platform, and he wants to help people who do these Comic-Cons and things like that get specific custom costumes. So his platform allows for a lot of variation. You don't just say, I want a part number of this and this and this. He has a way of being able to communicate to artisans who make it. Well, he's finding that, yeah, Comic-Con, there's a lot happening, but people are poor. So maybe there's another area we can look at. How about 3D printing? 3D printing is very much also in a very custom way. So he's learning through rapid build, measure, learn loops what could be some other applications for what he has in his hands right now. And what this means, instead of a hockey stick or valley of death, you have what we're calling momentum scaling. H1, H2, H3. And each of these horizons has a specific meaning. Basically, you first establish an ability to execute. You find some reference customers and you build some cases to show that, yes, you can create value. And these reference customers will help you enter the market. You partner with your customers to go get better customers. Then you establish market credibility and then market influence. So we're not talking about traction at all costs. It's very much a staged, a momentum. And each of these momentums has a characteristic curve, which I talk more about in my study. Beachhead, surge, consolidation, maturity, and then you go to your next one, and your next one. So you end up creating a matrix of decision criteria. And that's the big core that I'm working on, and that I would love to get your feedback in conversations, is this is a first level, high level key questions of decision criteria. Because what is strategy? Strategy is how you make choices. So what I want to do is help people make smarter choices where they stay in control. If you want to go get venture capital, that's fine. But do it when you have control. So here are some of the principles. For example, execution has to go ahead of traction. You build capability, then you get customers. If you wait to get your customers before you create capability, you're always behind. The overall strategic thing, this is where we're getting really fancy here, and this is like 100 pages of description. I won't get into tonight, but basically this becomes a 9-dimension strategic matrix, and this is all the questions you should be asking yourself. And so I'm building right now with the Scale Up project a program to guide people. So depending where you are in your go-to-market and depending on what dimension you're looking at, you can come up with actions, decisions that help you to keep in control. Because that's what you want. You want to stay in control. You want to build a gazelle. You want to build a highly profitable business. So then you don't need investors. And if you want investors to make it even more profitable, they'll be running to you. You don't have to go to these demo days anymore. They will find, if you're profitable, they will find you. Another piece that I don't have time to go into tonight, but PJF. You have problem solution fit, product market fit. But what we don't do enough is product to jobs to be done fit, because that's where you find the value, the real value of what you're creating. So PJF, that's something you should, and there's quite a bit of stuff that you can find on Google about that. So to summarize, Mark Zuckerberg is stupid. He says move fast and break things. So he's built something that's breaking right now. Facebook is breaking apart. It's time to break it. I believe it's move smart and build things. It's not for everybody, but for those who resonate with this, I would love to continue the conversation. I am looking for partners to work with. In summary, Clayton Christensen, the guy who invented the word disruption, even he says, be patient for growth, but impatient for cash flow. And we need to get that back into our conversation. You can reach me anytime. I'd love to continue the conversation. And I really appreciate being here tonight to be able to share this with you. Thank you very much, Rita. I'll be putting this up on SlideShare, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn or Facebook, and I can send you the link, and I'll send it also through the network.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci, Davender.
Thank you.